Hello, today is April 2nd, and I'm sorry I left you with a cliffhanger yesterday. I filmed about a 40-minute video and decided it was just too much and cut it at what I thought was the first reasonable stopping point, although I think replaying it kind of mid-word. So today we're going to be talking about all models are wrong, some models are useful, part deux, the Empire Strikes Back. We're going to do just a quick view of some of the ditties in the news because I think it's great context always. We have passed the million mile club, no, the million case club as a globe. Um, you see things like more than 1,000 in the U.S. die in a single day from the virus. Or no, maybe that's, yeah, it's a single day. Weekly jobless claims, 6 million. The global virus passes the million mark, and a single U.S. baby dies. That sort of gets back to the comment that, again, is attributed to Stalin, but was actually earlier, which says a million deaths is a statistic, one death is a tragedy. So there's a million cases and a baby. Now, it's very, very rare for children and even neonates to be seriously ill from this virus, but it does happen. And it is a tragedy, no question, but a million cases is also a tragedy. So New York Times, total deaths in the U.S. over 6,000 now, 243,000 cases. And I was looking at this timeline, and they started on February 26th to April 1st, yesterday, where the last full day of information. That's 5 weeks. 5 weeks that rocked the world. 5 weeks is really. Now, you've seen this graph before. Every day they publish a graph of the number of cases in the U.S., and they used to have much bigger circles. They've rescaled them now because the circles scaling had gotten so big that New York Circle would cover the entire eastern seaboard at this point. So they've rescaled them. So it may look like we have less cases. It's not true. We just have a different scale. What they've done in the last 2 days, which I think is so useful, is they're publishing information on where the growth rates are the highest. And these are in terms of doubling times. And the reddish-orange colors are doubling times in the 3-day range. And the orange times are in the doubling times of 5 days. And then the light yellow are 7-ish days. So the orange days in places in particular are where it's growing quite fast. So Phoenix, Pennsylvania, like Philly region, parts of Jersey, up into Connecticut and Massachusetts, still in the Michigan area, it's still around Indianapolis, etc. So I wanted to toot my own horn because I like myself. When I published a few days ago which states are in trouble, I did my own map that tried to show the same thing. Remember on this graph, if you've seen this video, I had the number of cases on the x-axis and the growth rate specifically, actually estimated from data on the right. And then I said, you don't want to be in the upper right where you have a lot of cases and you're growing fast. And at the time, New York was certainly the highest in the country in terms of cases, and New Jersey was second, but Michigan was fifth. And, Pennsylvania and Louisiana and some of these Massachusetts were behind California and Washington. It's hard to see in this log scale drawing line up and down, but it's true. And so I pointed out in orange and red where I thought the big problems would be. So the 3 states that were high cases and high growth, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, were in deep, deep doo-doo. Places that had large numbers but not super huge yet, but were growing fast, were going to become deep doo-doo. So that would be, I'm using scientific terms. I'll try to be a little bit more careful next time to use something that's less obscure. But Louisiana, that's New Orleans, Southern Florida, Houston, Indianapolis, I said, I think, didn't I? Phoenix, Boston, Pennsylvania. So I wanted to show you today's top 10 from the New York Times. New York leads, New Jersey second place, Michigan has now passed California. Where's Washington? California, Louisiana, Florida, Massachusetts, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Washington. Number 10, I think. This graphic here shows the sort of growth rates. So there's a light yellow that you see Washington is doing a really good job slowing down their growth rate in the last week or so. California has done a middling job the whole time, but these red areas are just really spectacularly fast growth. And Pennsylvania has been doing that really, really tremendously well, which is not a good thing. So the states that had the highest cases and fatalities initially, Washington first, then California, and then New York. California's dropped to fourth, despite being one of the most populous states, maybe the most populous state in the nation. And Washington is about to fall out of the top 10. And who is replacing them? Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Florida are in this cluster here. Illinois is somewhere in one of these. I think it's that one as well. And so we have all of these that I circled in orange as being sort of once poised to become really huge problems, did in fact become huge problems. So now I've taken the two graphs from today, the one that has the red dots and the one that has the color, and say, okay, where are we going to see continued problems over the next several days? So I'm looking for places that are orange, not yellow, not blue, and have fairly reasonable big red circles. Although the size of the circle is the red circle is less important than the intensity of the color, because the growth rate is such a big deal. Doubling every 3 days versus doubling every 7 or 8 days, over a course of 10 or 12 days can be a 20-fold difference or something in total number of cases. I don't know. I made that up. It's close. In any case, the northeastern corridor continues to be a huge problem. As we saw, there were areas in eastern Pennsylvania and in Jersey and Massachusetts and Connecticut that are growing very, very fast. And we have this enormous problem in New York City, and it's still growing fairly fast. And when you already have tens of thousands of cases, any growth is painful. We're seeing Michigan continue to become a much more significant epicenter of the virus in this country. Illinois, Chicago area, Indianapolis. I circled Ohio because that's been called out. The Cleveland area, that's Pittsburgh. Atlanta, New Orleans. I said last time, I don't think I knew what, I looked at Texas, and there were cases in Houston and in Dallas, and I wasn't sure where the growth was fastest. Right now it's Houston that's growing more quickly. Southern Florida is still growing, and Arizona. And even though there is growth happening in California and in some parts of Washington, the areas that had the big infections early on are actually growing quite slowly because people have gotten scared out of their minds, as they should be, and are doing a better job of staying inside and staying out of trouble. So a couple other things from the news. Those Holland America cruise ships are finally going to be allowed to dock, and people will get medical aid, and it's a disaster. This is France. This is Paris on lockdown. Now, I've been outside for a doctor's appointment, and we went to the grocery store once. We try to only go out once a day and try to limit it to less than an hour. And there's a lot of cars on the freeway and a lot of people in the parking lot. And I look at pictures of Italy and Spain and France on lockdown, and I see empty streets. So we're doing lockdown a little bit differently than they are, and that's going to be a problem. I think that's going to bite us in the ass. Sorry. Some things from the news. Trump said the governors are complainers and will never be satisfied. I want to really say something just completely, utterly inappropriate here. Like, we're facing the most significant threat to our country in 50, 80, 100 years, and he's complaining that governors aren't happy with him because he's FEMA has asked the Pentagon for 100,000 body bags. So what does FEMA think? We're not going to stop until we get well past 100,000 deaths. New York could run out of ventilators within days. Remember when Cuomo asked for 30,000 ventilators and Trump said, yeah, hospitals have 1 or 2. You're never going to need 30,000. What was that, less than a week ago? 5 days? 7 days? I don't know. I didn't look it up, but it's very recently. And Dr. Fauci now is being threatened by conspiracy theorists who think that this whole virus, ooby-dooby, heebie-jeebie, boogeyman's going to get you, is some sort of plot to unseat Trump and the right from power made by, I don't know exactly who made that particular, who's driving the conspiracy, but someone is. And it's whack, just plain whack. Okay, so picking up where we left off. Last time I was talking about the model, the Chris Murray model. I think I got the name right. We'll check out in a second because it's in here. And its prediction that there was going to be 84,000 deaths total in the U.S. when this thing was over in the fall. So between now and then, we're already at 6,000. We're going to only add about another 80,000, a little bit less, and we'll be done. And that got picked up very quickly in the White House. And so the model, which assumes that all the states will impose a fairly significant version of lockdown, of travel restrictions, of so forth, was widely quoted. And in fact, I've gone and I've gotten some even fun quotes. So the White House press briefing referred to this several days ago as the Chris Murray model. Now, IHME is the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, something, I forget what. But it's the University of Washington Institute at which this model came out of. And this actually came from their webpage, where within about 5 seconds of it becoming the Chris Murray model in DC, I don't know how long I've been to post this, it was more than 5 seconds. But they then started touting in their own materials that it's now called the Chris Murray model. This is a press release from today, actually. So this was done several days ago, and now they've jumped on the bandwagon. So what did it predict? Things are going to peak in mid-April. We're in April right now, whereas some people think we're in March 33rd and March will never end, right? It's going to be March 76th or March 92nd before the lockdown in March ends. In any case, it predicts that we're going to peak in mid-April at about 2,000 deaths a day. We're already at 1,000 deaths a day, and we'll end up with 84,000. The original estimate was 81,000 5 days ago, but I think when it got picked up by the White House the next day, they had revised it to 84. And they did acknowledge that their estimate has significant variability. 36,000 to 150,000 is a lot of variability. And so that, give them props for that. But and they said this will only be true if all states take 3 of at least these 4 major steps: closing schools, ending non-essential services, sheltering in place, and imposing strict travel restrictions. We've done many of those things. Our travel restrictions between states and cities has not been really imposed. And sheltering in place, I think, in this country means having a vacation and occasionally going to the beach, which is not what it's supposed to mean. So I think if we don't shelter in place well, and if we don't really stick to we get everyone but essential services out there, we're gonna pay for it in lives, many lives. So the study's projections caught a lot of attention because they're lower than many others. I remember Dr. Fauci had said 200,000 deaths possible, and maybe a couple other times he said 100 to 200,000 deaths. Sorry about that. And this model predicts 80,000, and it's like, bink, we're done. The highest possible number they could predict is 150. Very different from Dr. Fauci's predictions, although Dr. Fauci didn't present a model. And they interviewed several people for this article on this model in the paper I was reading. And one was this guy, Dr. Braithwaite at NYU, who said it's possible that this is true if we take immediate drastic measures, but if not, the real estimate may be 2 to 5 times higher. So 2 to 5 times higher than 80 is 160 to 400,000. So that's a very different number. So it's really important to understand what this model is assuming and what it says. So here we get to all the stuff that's brand new. It turns out they've been making updates to the model on a daily basis. And so I looked yesterday for the first time and found one of their updates. This is today's update. And I want to bring your attention to one of the things. Today's release, and this was on this page just here, it's actually down here in smaller letters, and I blew it up for you. Today, the estimate is now 93,500 deaths instead of 84,000, which was instead of 81,000. So in the 5 days the model's been out, they've increased their estimate of death by about 12,000 cases out of a denominator of 80. It's about a 15% increase in deaths in just the first few days of the model's public appearance. So that's troublesome in and of itself. I typically wouldn't want to see a model being revised every day, because if it's being revised every day, how predictive is it? And instead of a leading indicator, it becomes a lagging indicator. And remember, Fauci said 102,000 to 200,000 K, and he's got security detail because he was, trying to do something nefarious. And 81,000 was clearly the right number. Well, now 81,000 is turned into 93, which, as we all know, is not far from 100, and is going on. So there's some real significant issues there, and it gets worse, and it makes me really angry. And so you're going to see some real anger right now, academic pissed off anger, and then I'll show you some more about the model probably in a third segment, because I've gotten deep into the model and some of its predictions, and there's some things there that I think are problematic. It's not that the model is impossible or wrong necessarily. I think it will end up being quite wrong, but it's how the model is being presented and used that really makes me furious. Okay, so the website, Christopher J.L. Murray. Don't forget both middle initials. Now I'm just being mean. Their website is absolutely spectacularly beautiful, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to show it to you. So, Institute for Health, what's it called? Health Measurement and Metrics and Evaluation is, I think, a Bill and Melinda Gates founded institute. It has a number of very interesting things. You can learn about the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. That's the that it is. You can look at their data visualizations about COVID-19. See how it's popping up and down? It's awfully nice. Not from the top, guys, from the bottom. It's a beautiful website. This actually comes from the COVID-19 publication that they're talking about. No, it's not the calcific aortic valve disease. It's the research article from March 26 on forecasting COVID-19 impacts, which was based partly on the research article published on March 24th about the epidemiological data from the COVID-19 outbreak. So that's the website. We can keep going on the website, and I'll actually take us there. So visualizations. COVID-19 resource about it. Here's the White House press briefing. It's called the Chris Murray model, and they have all these beautiful things. Let's view those projections. You get this very nice website. I'm going to actually shrink a little bit. No, I'm not. My screen hopefully is. So that we can see this. This is the United States of America. What we're looking at here is a slider bar of the number of ventilators or beds or ICU beds needed, and relative to potential capacity on any individual day. So I stopped there. That's April 15th. We're going to need 262,000 beds, of which 39,000 need to be ICU beds, and we need at least 31,000 ventilators nationwide. Now, if that's true, then Governor Cuomo asking for 30,000 ventilators for New York City is way overkill. And by the way, ventilators are not pleasant. It's a very invasive treatment. It's very dangerous. It carries great risk, and it's not always successful. So having a ventilator, needing the ventilation at that point means you're very close to death, and it might or might not work. So that's just another aside there. And so we can then look at deaths per day, and so we see it peaks at around 2,644 per day on April 16th, and then it tails off. And we could actually look at cumulative deaths now. So now this is the accumulation of those deaths. It's a gorgeous website, I have to say. We have an expression in modeling, garbage in, garbage out. And so if the data or the underlying assumptions of your model are messed up, no matter how well they're hidden and no matter how well they're dressed up, the old lipstick on a pig concept, it's not okay. This is beautiful. If the data behind it and the science behind it is even half as good as this website, then it's a phenomenal model. So we see that the cases rise and the uncertainty is being bounded in this sort of filled yellow region. So on June 1st, the prediction is 91,852 deaths with a confidence interval that goes from 39,000 at the low end to 170 at the high end. So that even though 91 is their point estimate, their best guess, it could be in this range. So already that range includes a lot of the 100 and 200 that Dr. Anthony Fauci has been talking about and getting kind of a lot of crap for. So we can try to download the results or go learn more about the model. We can also say, hey, I want to know what's going on in Michigan, because Michigan looks like they're in trouble. Michigan is imposed their stay-at-home order on the 24th. They closed schools on the 16th. They have not severely limited travel. This is Michigan's state-specific curve. In this case, this purple line here is the number of hospital beds available, and they have 10,000, and they're going to need 15,000 in 8 days. So Michigan is going to run out of beds in 8 days, it says. And then we can say, well, I really want to look just at ventilators. And then it can zoom in and show me that, okay, here's the ventilator curve. They're only going to need 2,000 ventilators, and that's going to peak on April 8th in 6 days. And then they have the deaths per day and the cumulative deaths, and they're going to end up with 3,169 COVID-related deaths at the end of this in August. Whereas we could, for example, check on Ohio, which I'm going to be showing you. Ohio and Michigan are my two case studies because I know those states very well, and they're quite different in what's happening right now. So Ohio is going to peak April 18th in terms of hospital use. This is now deaths. It's going to peak later, about a week later, April 22nd. We're going to end up with 1,898 deaths, although the confidence interval here goes from 600 to 3,500. I didn't show the confidence interval for Michigan carefully, I don't think, but it's as wide or wider than the one for Michigan, which is a little interesting. So which one of these other things did I want to get to with that? There we go. So here's the website, and there's Christopher J.L. Murray. And so we're going to read the article. So what do? We click on the article, and it takes us to the journal medRxiv. How many of you thought that was medRxiv? That's the way you pronounce it, where that's the R and that's chi from chi-squared test, or however you want to think about it in IV, our medRxiv. And here it is, the journal article, and we can click on it, and we can get to, I'll go back to my presentation now. We can get from the website to the article. And we got from that article, and we're going to get from the PDF, which we can download, the key points of the article. Assuming social distancing measures are maintained, what are the forecasted gaps in available health services and number of deaths for each state? We found using a statistical model, we predict excess demand will be this amount, and that amount for beds, and this much for ventilators, and we estimate 81,000 deaths. And we now know that's been revised to 95,000 deaths, and so forth. So I'm familiar, and I've shown, I think on the video, but certainly looked at Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Association, some epidemiological journals for really high quality information about this. I had never heard of medRxiv, which is what I thought it was at first, but it's medRxiv. So I looked up what medRxiv is. It's a preprint server for the health sciences. And this is their little thing. Caution. This is where I'm really angry. Caution. Preprints are preliminary reports of work that have not been certified by peer review. They should not be relied on to guide clinical practice or health-related behavior, and should not be reported in the news media as established information. That is exactly the opposite of how it's being handled, not only by the White House, but by the IHME. They are making a big deal of this. They're stoking the media and enjoying the publicity, and they've got it published. No, they don't. They've got a copy of a preprint in a preprint server that says nobody's looked at this. No other peers have commented on it. It hasn't gone through any of the rigorous scientific review that we usually call something. When we say a research article, that's what we usually mean. We don't mean I've done a report and I'm going to give it to you. It means I've done a research article. It's gone to some reputable journal. They've sent it out to 2 or 3 experts in the field. It's come back with feedback, revisions, and so forth. And by the time it's published, it should be pretty good. Now, that process doesn't always work. And sometimes we get garbage reviews, and sometimes bad stuff bubbles to the surface. And it's not perfect. But this hasn't even tried for that. And so I thought, okay, medRxiv. There we go. It's not an X, it's a chi. I thought maybe that was like a generic sort of disclaimer in case they got sued. So I wanted to see more about what their sort of philosophy was. So I clicked on About. That's the little cursor there, and this is me showing you that I actually clicked there. And this is what it came up. About medRxiv, and this is where I learned that R and then chi and IV archive is what that's supposed to be, is a free online archive and distribution server for complete but unpublished manuscripts. When you go for tenure and you say you have a research article, it damn well better be a published peer-reviewed article, or you're going to be in trouble. You see, I wrote a manuscript and I've actually printed it out for you. We don't know what that means. So they say in bold in this About, preprints are preliminary reports of work that have not been certified peer reviewed. They should not be relied on to guide clinical practices, blah, blah, blah. So there you go, quid pro quo. Oh, that's something else. Sorry, QED, which is math for it's been proven, it's been shown. So calling this a research article is already a stretch because it's really a report that hasn't gone through peer review, and the journal-ish server that they used to publish it in, present it, make it available, in their own documents make it very clear that they don't intend these preprints to be guiding media discussion, public and clinical practices or public health decisions, because we simply don't know if the information is been validated by reviewers from experts in that field. So this thing is the article that's been touted that shows that Anthony Fauci is wrong. This is going to be fine. He's our hero, Christopher J.L. Murray, because he showed us that really coronavirus isn't going to be so bad. Bad words are, yeah, no, not okay. Not even, and I'm really cheesed off at the folks at the IHME. They're just eating this up. I mean, I don't want to make this a personal thing, but I think it's really irresponsible to be promoting this as the model that the White House is using, and that it's this published paper and it's based on another published article, which, by the way, is not a published article at all either. It's a data repository that Nature does, so they don't have any published articles that have gone through peer review. And sending out press releases that their model is now called the Chris Murray model at the White House is certainly not doing what medRxiv says you should do, which is avoid publicity and don't make public health decisions based on this until it's been through validation through peer review. So we're going to get into the guts of the model and talk about its predictions for deaths and hospital use in Ohio and Michigan. The prediction is in Michigan, you're in trouble. We're going to run out of ICU beds. We're going to run out of ventilators, and people are going to die because of it. And in Ohio, the prediction is no problem. And the reason this is so important to me is, look, this is what got me started on this. It's actually now 2 days ago in the Cleveland newspaper. University of Washington projections coronavirus won't overwhelm Ohio hospitals and ICU beds. And it shows very clearly when you click on that state or you pull down Ohio, that Ohio has plenty of capacity in terms of beds, in terms of ICU beds, in terms of ventilators. So they're not going to be overrun by this virus like New York is. That may be true. I actually don't think it's going to be true, but it might be. But there's certainly not a lot of strong evidence from this model that we should trust them. But it's in the popular press in Ohio, and it's telling people, chill, it's not going to be a problem here. That's really problematic. And then I'll come back next time and get deeply into the model as I can. And it's a curve-fitting model based on data from China and Italy and I think Spain, maybe. And it makes a lot of really simple assumptions and then makes some really, really big extrapolations that have huge error bars, I think much bigger than they actually acknowledge in their own shaded little regions. So I think the model is extremely unreliable for more, and I'm not sure I'm right. I don't believe for a second that we're going to peak in 2 weeks and be out of this thing with only 90,000 deaths. I think it's going to be much worse. And if this model ends up being perfect, then please write me emails in about 6 months and tell me I was a doofus and I was worried about nothing. But I don't think I'm worried about nothing. I think something really serious continues to grow. Europe still looks absolutely terrible. Turkey right now is blowing up. Africa apparently is also blowing up. This is not something that we need to take lightly, and by publishing models that suggest it's not nearly as significant a risk as we thought, when those models haven't had very stringent or any peer review, could lead to people violating stay-at-home orders because they're pretty sure Ohio's okay and go to the beach in Ohio. We actually have a big lake to the north of Ohio. It's called Lake Erie, and it's kind of like a big freshwater ocean thingy, and there are beaches, just in case you were wondering. And so I think that it's a problem. So I think I've ranted at you for so far, and so that's part deux, which is the paper is not a paper. The model has not been peer-reviewed. It's hard as hell to find the actual physical structure of the model, the math they use, and to try to figure out what it does in each state, which I've done. And then I found out after that, doing more digging, that it's not a published article. It is a preprint, and it is being improperly used by the press, encouraged by the people who wrote the article, which I think is unconscionable. So I'll leave you there. Like, I'm going to stop so you won't just have the screen go blank with me in the middle of a sentence. And then tomorrow I hope to get more of this up there. I hope this hasn't been boring, but holy moly, one thing I hate most is bad science being, it might not be bad science, but we don't know if it's good science. Bad, unverified science being touted as fact. That is just not okay. Bunch of weenies.